بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا Muhammad وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Inshallah, continuing the station of Tuma'ninah, tranquility, we enter upon the three levels. Abu Ismail rahimahullah ta'ala says, وهي على ثلاث درجات. الدرجة الأولى طمأنينة القلب بذكر الله، وهي طمأنينة الخائف إلى الرجاء والضجر إلى الحكم والمبتلى إلى المثوبة. In this first level, it is the most practical. Meaning this first level is about how do we apply, what can we do to reach tranquility, to reach Tuma'ninah. And as the verse clearly says, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. In the remembrance of Allah, do hearts find rest. And so the first level is therefore tranquility of the heart through the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is broader than just saying certain phrases. Saying those phrases is part of the equation here. It's not the entirety of the equation. Rather, remembering Allah, just knowing that He is there, will help provide that tranquility we're looking for. But how so? In three ways. Number one, it brings tranquility to the one who is afraid by taking them to hope. So, if you remember when we spoke about the station of hope, one of the benefits of hope is that it cools down fear. It calms fear. Why is that? Because what is fear really? Fear is concern about some event in the future or something that could happen in the future that might lead to something difficult, something harmful to us. That's what fear is. So we don't fear something in the past, something that has ended, it's done. We don't fear that. We have grief over that, maybe. We might feel sad over that. We might regret it, but we don't fear it. The only time a past event becomes something of fear is when it might have ramifications in the future. When it might come back to haunt us in the future. That's when it becomes something of fear. But fear is always about the future. Something that is unknown. We don't know the outcome, and those outcomes could be potentially harmful. And so how do we cool this down? How do we calm this fear? Well, we need to find something that counters that is attached to the future of the person, that will bring us some sort of benefit. And that is what we call hope. Raja, hope. And so raja cools down fear. Hope cools down, it calms fear. And we spoke about this in more detail when we spoke about the station of raja. And so when we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing that He is there, and the conception we have of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in that His names after Allah is Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. And so whenever Allah is involved, and He's always involved, there's nothing that moves except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is involved, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So knowing that Allah is there reminds us that therefore mercy is there. By first and foremost telling us that there is a possibility for mercy. There is a possibility, because Allah is there, there is always that possibility that what I am afraid of will be deflected or mitigated or completely prevented from reaching me. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. And He's Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. So that's the first step. As soon as we remember Allah, when we are afraid, again, this is before saying any phrases, just remembering Allah's presence will also remind us that the mercy is there. So long as Allah is in existence, and He's always in existence, always has been, always will be. He's the eternal subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, mercy is there because He is the source of mercy. And nothing comes from Allah except that it is mercy. So by simply remembering the presence of Allah, it begins to calm fear. Why? Because that concern of that potential harm is now being countered by the presence of Allah, who is the embodiment of mercy, the embodiment of good. So remembering Allah, His presence, will have this effect. Now, in order for this effect to work properly, we have to have a correct and accurate understanding of who Allah is. And the stronger our understanding is to Allah, and the stronger our relationship is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more we can manifest hope through Allah. The more the remembrance of Allah will bring about this meaning and then cool the effect. And so how much calm and tranquility we receive when we are afraid is proportionate to how much we know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how attached we are to Allah, and how accurate our knowledge of Allah is. But if someone has an incomplete understanding of Allah, a very poor understanding of Allah, if someone doesn't know how Allah is merciful towards them, they just don't see Allah's mercy in the world, then they're not going to have this effect. And so this is why it's so important, and there are so many talks, so many lectures about the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, names and His attributes. If you just go to YouTube, in probably any language in the world, the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're probably going to find lectures, multiple lectures, talking about it. Why? Because this is a fundamental part of our religion. And as we've gone through before, the more we know about Allah, the more we become attached to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once we get to the station of al-mahabba, love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll find that the more we know about Allah, the more we love Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So through the remembrance of Allah, remembering His presence, and that can be reinforced through those phrases, when we start saying La ilaha illallah, when we start saying Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, all the phrases that we're familiar with, this works to reinforce Allah's presence in our lives. It focuses on kind of not only just remembering that He is there, to now actively go towards Him through this act of worship, and for that act of worship to be reciprocated by Allah through barakah, through blessings. Because as Allah says, Ista'inu bihi, seek Allah's help. Wasta'inu bis sabri was salah. Get help from Allah through salah and through patience. Right? So by saying these phrases in a time like this, in a time when we are afraid, that essentially works as the isti'ana part. When we say this, why are we saying it? If you're afraid, or there's a problem, and you start doing dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why are you doing that? We're reaching out to Allah. This is our way of saying, oh Allah, help me. So through the remembrance of Allah, our hope in Allah calms down this fear. And the reason why we do dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what? When you sit and let's say you're going through some difficulty. There's some problem you're going through, and it's pressuring you, it's putting a lot of stress on you. Very common for the Muslim to grab those tasbih beads, those dhikr beads, or grab the Quran and start reciting. Why are we doing that? Out of hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will change our situation. This is correct aqeedah. This is correct belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That if we need His help, He can help us. And so, through those actions, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides us with that hope. And through those actions, we remind ourselves of Allah's mercy, and thus we have hope in Him. And through that hope, it calms and counterbalances, it's a counter effect to fear, and what fear is and what fear does. So that's the first. Through the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and remembering His presence, it instills within us hope, and that hope calms down fear. The second is وَالضَّجِرْ إِلَى الْحُكُمِ. Dajr is panic. And when someone gets bad news and they have a very negative reaction, yelling, oh my God, what am I going to do? What is this? What happened? They have this very panicky reaction. That is dajr. And so we calm our panic, and fear is a little bit different than panic, I think. Fear is about something in the future, something possible that could happen. Panic is when something has actually happened. And so although they seem similar, and although they might stem from something similar, what causes them, what triggers them is different. Fear is in the future, something of the future, whereas panic is something that has already happened. And so how do we calm panic? By remembering Allah's adjudication, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's judgment, His hukum. And the hukum is twofold. The hukum shari'i, the ruling of Allah that has to do with the religion. What Allah said is halal, haram. What Allah commanded us to do, what He prohibited us from doing. This is one type of hukum. And so when we are in a state of panic, right, the Sharia comes and regulates our behavior. So when someone is panicking, maybe men do this more than women, they might start yelling, they might start attacking their children, they might start doing something wrong. And in their panic, they might consider doing things that are haram. The Sharia comes and says, that's haram, you can't do it. It restricts the person's behavior in their time of panic. Because when we're angry, when we're panicking, that is when we make poor decisions. And I heard this, I'm not sure if the science is true, but let's just, consider it, that when a person is angry, the blood in their brain shifts from this front to a different part of the brain. Now, the decision-making part, the rational part of the brain is the front part. This is where we make decisions. This is where we consider things. This is where we use our logic and rationale to make decisions, right here. Right? When we're angry, it shifts to a different place, and therefore a different part of our brain is working. And this is why, again, if the science that I heard is true, this is why when we're angry, we make poor decisions. Because the part of our brain that's now taking over is not the part where it allows us rational thinking. So when we are in a state of panic, when we're angry, we need to have something that forces us to regulate our behaviors, because our mind isn't going to do that anymore. The Sharia comes and says, hey, so-and-so, you're panicking, but don't do this. Don't do that. Fear Allah. The Prophet ﷺ taught us that if you're angry, you're standing up, sit down. If you're panicking, you're sitting down, lay down. And in another narration, another hadith, which is, I believe, weaker, but nonetheless, it's something that I think is fine to practice. If you're angry, go make wudu. Why? Because when you're angry, that's a door for the shaitan. The shaitan comes and tries to take advantage of that. And since the shaitan is made of fire, when he comes, he heats you up. And that heat only exacerbates, it makes your anger worse. So when you go and make wudu, you cool yourself down. Also, if all that isn't accurate, at least when you go make wudu, you're taking a breath. You're removing yourself from the environment, and you're taking a few moments to kind of cool off. You make wudu, you change your mindset, you focus on something else. And if you were to add 2 rak'ahs to that, even better. Right? So when we're in a state of panic, something has come and is now influencing our behaviors in a negative way. We want another force to come and make sure we don't fall out of line. That's what the Sharia comes. So when we're panicking, understanding Allah's halal, the halal and the haram, the obligations and the prohibitions, comes to regulate our behaviors and maintain us. How many people have done something when they're angry that they regret for the rest of their life? May Allah protect us. How many people have been murdered or killed because the person who murdered was angry? And it's so unfortunate. We hear stories in the Arab world. I'm sure you hear stories in your part of the world as well, where a father's angry, he goes and he slaps his child, and the child dies out of that force. We hear this. A moment of anger can create a life of depression. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for refuge, we ask Him for protection, Ya Rabbil Alameen. But when we apply the Sharia, it maintains that Tuma'ninah. So that's one part. When we're panicking, when we're angry, the Sharia comes to maintain us. That's one form of hukum. The other form of hukum is al-hukum al-kawni, what we call qada and qadar. When we're panicking, let's say some man who's a business owner, etc., sees that, or let's say something a little bit more engageable for the masses. The economy is going crazy, right? Because of COVID and all this stuff. And I'm sure we have investments, we have pensions, we have 401ks, we have IRAs, whatever. When a crash occurs, and when the person looks at their bank account or their investment, all of a sudden see a huge drop, a huge dip. Someone who has a large sum of money in these investments is going to lose a large sum of money. And when a person sees that, what's going to be the reaction? Now I remember in the crash of 2008, maybe you all remember this. Like in news and whatnot, experts were advising people, don't look at your investments. Don't look at your accounts. Not now. Because people were having heart attacks and people were just going crazy. Right? For us, we'll look at it. But when we see that dip, what do we say? قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ مَا شَاءَ وَفَعَلَ. This is Allah's qadar. يَبْسُطُ الرِّزْقَ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ وَيَقْبِضُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expands provisions to whom He wills, and He withholds from whom He wills. The qadar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever the situation might be, something happened that is negative, yes, our normal human reaction is to panic. But when we remember Allah's qada and qadar, and what branches out from this belief, what does it come and do? It calms us down. This is Allah's qadar. And you see this most when? In funerals. You see this most in funerals. So-and-so passed away, it's Allah's qadar, it's His time to die, alhamdulillah, even if they're not very practicing people. This is why it's a rukun. This is why it is a pillar of the faith. So you see how important it is to our own behaviors, our own mental, emotional, spiritual well-being. You know, there was a story of an individual, this Muslim man was in an airplane, and he's telling his own story. He's in an airplane and they went through massive turbulence, huge turbulence, up and down, and the warning lights started to come out, and those oxygen, whatever they're called, those oxygen bags came down and whatnot, and you can imagine. You can imagine people are going nuts. Oh my God, we're gonna die. And I'm sure some people saying, we're gonna die. And this Muslim man sitting there like this. Very calm. SubhanAllah, alhamdulillah, doing dhikr. And people noticed him. And alhamdulillah, after the turbulence ended, the guy next to him said, like, are you on drugs? I'm adding details here, just to make it a little bit more entertaining. I don't know if he actually said this, but you can imagine the reaction. Are you on like some sort of medicine that calms you down? Are you drowsy or something like that? The guy said, no. I'm a Muslim and we believe in Allah's qadar. If it's my time to die, nothing's going to change that. You can see the peace of mind, the peace of heart, the Tuma'ninah, the tranquility that came to this person's heart when he needed it most. And that comes from what? His connection to Allah, his remembrance of Allah. Just by saying, if it's my time, it's my time. There's nothing I can do about it. Even if I'm sitting home, in my bed, in the comfort of my home, if it's my time to die, I'm going to die. And it happens. In the first year I was in Jordan, one of the members of the local masjid I used to attend, I used to always go to salah. You know how convenient it is over there. You just walk a few minutes and you're at the masjid. So people would always frequent the masjid. One of the guys who would frequent it, when he was getting ready to go to Maghrib prayer, he fell, he tripped, he fell, hit his neck or hit his head, and he passed away. In the comfort of his own home. It's his time to pass away. That's his life. Okay? And so qada and qadar, the hukum of Allah, comes to calm down the dajar. Also, when we think of Allah's qada and qadar, and what it really means for the believer, Allah plans, we have things, we have our plans, we have our visions, we think we know how to get there. Allah knows best. So when Allah's qadar comes and shifts our route or prevents us from continuing, and our trust is in Allah, we believe that Allah knows best for us. Okay, it's not meant to be, and that's better for me. Who knows what could have happened, what would have happened, who knows what door Allah has opened for me. By closing a door, Allah doesn't just close the door and says, oh, tough luck. When Allah closes the door, He opens a better door for us. So this qadar, this belief comes, and it calms the panic. And so you find this in the believers. They're calm people. They are people who tranquility, tuma'ninah, is truly ingrained in them. That even when the most difficult of situations come, their reaction is very peaceful. It doesn't mean they don't hurt. It doesn't mean they don't feel any emotions. We're not immune to emotions, nor is it wise to be immune to emotions. If someone's immune to emotions, then there's something wrong there. But it regulates our behaviors. It calms it down. It allows the good of those feelings to be felt, and it prevents the negative, the poison of those feelings to enter into our hearts. So, Tuma'ninah comes into our lives when we are panicking. How? When we remember Allah's hukum, His hukum shari'i, the religious side, And حكم الكوني, the قضاء and qadar, it calms us down. And the third thing is وَالْمُبْتَلَى إِلَى الْمَثُوبَةِ, someone who's being tested. Some people, subhanallah, this is Allah's wisdom. Some people's lives are very easy. And there's hadith that mentions this. Some people, Allah's qadar is that their lives is very simple, full of ease, full of opportunities, and they're good Muslims, practicing Muslims. And other Muslims, their lives are full of tests. And remember, we always make the difference between tests and punishments. These are two different things. Okay? The lives of prophets are full of tests, not full of punishments. Prophets aren't punished, right? With maybe the exception of Yunus alayhi salam. But generally speaking, Allah loves His prophets and does not punish them, He tests them. Okay? So when a practicing Muslim is going through a difficulty, they're being tested, they're not being punished. So it's very important to differentiate between those two. So when a person is being tested, it's difficult. And that test brings on a lot of pressure. And that pressure brings on a lot of stress. And we need to deal with that. Or else it can crush us. Especially when that test is long-term. Some people, their test is long-term. Someone loses a child, they're not going to get out of that test. They're always going to have a void in their heart for their child. But that can be That can be counseled. That can be healed. It's not going to go away. Allah's qadr, that qadr is not going to change. It's permanent. It's done. But it can be healed. How so? By looking at the reward. By considering the reward. We as human beings, it makes perfect sense to strive and struggle and put ourselves through difficulty, endure difficulty, in order to reach a goal. We go to school, your children go to college, they're going to college, they went to college, whatever it is. And maybe some of their majors were difficult majors, especially when you get into the sciences, or the med school, any of these medical schools, dentistry, whatever. Difficult. And you see them going through difficulty. You see the stress in their face. You see how that's affected their well-being. But they endure it, and you help them endure it. Do you ever tell them, no, you got to get out of this? No. Why not? Because there's a goal. There's a goal at the end. And that goal feels reachable. You're almost there. Yes, it's difficult, but it's only 4 years. And then the rest of your life, you're going to enjoy what you endured. You're going to enjoy the patience. Your patience is going to pay off. So we see that as making perfect sense. It makes sense to put myself through immense difficulty voluntarily if there's a positive end goal. Becoming a doctor, that means financial stability, that means, certain respect in society, among other things. It's worth it. Be patient. You're going to encourage them, they're going to encourage themselves. The same thing applies when it comes to tests. When Allah tests us, He's not testing us just because. He's not playing an experiment. He's not doing this for His own entertainment. Oh, let's see what's going to happen here. This isn't Hunger Games. Right? What this is there is a goal Allah knows about. Allah knows is superior to what you have now. He Himself, the higher levels of paradise, the Prophet says that Allah Himself planted the seeds and planted the plants of that place. He Himself built the home, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He knows that that's much better than what's in here. But He knows in order for you to reach it, in order for the Muslim to reach it, they need extra reward. Their actions might not be enough to where Allah wants them to be. So Allah tests them in order to raise their ranks. And so our conception of a test, yes, it's a difficulty. And it's meant to be difficult. Why? Because how else are we going to embody patience? How else are we going to embody hope in Allah? How else are we going to embody tawakkul on Allah? All of these things, patience, hope, tawakkul, fundamental parts of our iman, they only come about when there's some sort of uncertainty, when there's a difficulty. Or else if everything is A-okay, all the money's coming, I'm perfectly fine, Why do I need to have tawakkul on Allah? There's no point of it. We have tawakkul on Allah when there's some sort of difficulty, some sort of uncertainty. Right? And so it helps us foster and manifest the best of character. But in order for us to truly endure it, we need to remember the end goal. We need to remember where this is taking us and what this is meant to do for us, and that is paradise. And so when we remember the hadith that on the Day of Judgment, the people who are tested in life will be presented in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and their reward will be made clear to them. And upon seeing the reward, every single believer would wish that their life was full of tests. They wish that every single moment of their life was a test. Now, of course, what we should be doing is saying, "Oh Allah, please don't test me. Oh Allah, protect me." But the idea is that for those who are being tested, and when we are tested, we remember this hadith. And just like this med school student, they are enduring their troubles, or anyone, maybe someone building a company. In the beginning, it's very stressful. They're probably working 16, 17, 18 hours a day to get their company running. It's worth it though. The end goal is worth it. Same thing with a test. It is worth being patient. It is worth having tawakkul on Allah. It is worth having hope in Allah. Because what does it do for us? It builds our place in paradise. And so, we mentioned that there's a difference between being tested and being punished. When a person is being punished by Allah, they are being downgraded. May Allah protect us. They're being downgraded in this life and the next life. They're losing their status in this life and the next life. But when someone is being tested, Allah tests them to raise them in this life and the next life. And so, when we are being tested, how do we bring Tuma'ninah to the heart? Is by remembering Allah's reward. We bring that tranquility. Okay, this is worth dealing with. This is worth being patient for. I'm not being patient for free. I'm being compensated for my patience. I'm being compensated for my difficulty. I'm being compensated for the happiness or the joy or on any of these things that I'm missing out on as a result of my test. And so this is very important because everyone experiences testing. Everyone is tested. Every believer is tested. And so this is a huge part of our life. And we're always experiencing ups and downs in our lives. And we're always experiencing fears in our lives. So this very first level of Tuma'ninah, if someone can really ingrain it and root it in their hearts, they are paving the road for themselves. Of course, this is all by the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the road is being paved for them to have a good life. Hayatan tayyibah. A good and content-filled life. So that is the first level. The second level, الدرجة الثانية طمأنينة الروح في القصد إلى الكشف وفي الشوق إلى العدة وفي التفرقة إلى الجمع. Now, the second and third levels of طمأنينة is very Sufi, very overly spiritual. And so the first level truly is enough. The first level, if we can do that, more than enough. Second and third level, the third level I don't even talk about because it's just over my head and I think just completely unnecessary, except there's just one element there. But when it comes to the second level, the طمأنينة of the soul, the tranquility of the soul, this occurs when we have our goal set out. Where are we going and where am I taking myself? Once we determine that as a Muslim, and the Islamic goal is what? Paradise. Allah's ridwan, His pleasure. When we have our eyes set on that, this is a goal that cannot be changed or altered. And the more we're attached to that, the more we're pulled by that, then our purpose in life can never change. It can never be affected. Hopelessness, depression is a very severe thing. And one of the theories I've come across when it comes to why a person develops hopelessness, depression, or just depression in general, is as follows. We human beings, we create for ourselves a type of routine in life. When I wake up in the morning, I have my cup of coffee, have a little bit of breakfast, maybe look at my messages, maybe look at whatever, have a laugh or two. I go to work, come back from work, have my home, my family, we have dinner, we sit and relax, maybe have some tea, go to sleep. There's a type of routine. And yeah, every now and then we break that routine. We have to, right? But in general, we make a routine for ourselves. And we bring ourselves comfort through that routine. How? Because when we have a routine, we feel in control of our life. And our routine tends to be structured around our goal. If our goal in life is to have a healthy, loving family, our routine is going to be built around that. My goal in life is to seek knowledge, right? Increase my iman. Then my routine is going to be structured around that. If my goal in life is money, to make more money, my routine is going to be structured around that. So routine indicates a purpose. We cannot have a routine until we have some sort of purpose, regardless of what that purpose is, good or bad, nice or meaningless, whatever. And then that structure is us exerting control over our lives and pursuing that goal in life. Now, what happens with some people is some sort of major life event occurs and completely destroys the routine, makes it fall apart. If my routine was built around the family and now my husband passed away, or someone dear in our family passed away who was part of that routine, it could completely destroy that routine. If someone loses their job, it destroys that routine. And so the person, if they don't restore a type of routine, then they fall into depression. They feel like I have no control in my life and I have no purpose in my life. With Islam, our routine, our purpose can never be altered. Death in the family does not change our purpose. Loss of a job does not change our purpose. Unable to reach our worldly goals does not change our purpose. So if our routine is structured around this purpose, no matter what life event occurs, it can never debase it. It can never destroy, it can never alter it. Yes, we might feel the sorrow, it might slow down our pursuit of that goal. But so long as Allah exists, and He always exists, He's the eternal subhanahu wa ta'ala, then if our routine is structured around Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, then nothing can alter that. And so that is the Tuma'ninah of the soul, of the ruh. That is the tranquility of the soul. My purpose is permanent. It cannot be changed. And one of the major challenges of our time today is that people feel like they have no purpose. They have no purpose. And so the slightest events cause them to fall into depression. The slightest changes makes them upset, makes them frustrated. Why? It's like I have no control over my life. It's not that they don't have control over their life. It's that they're structuring their life around something that is uncontrollable. This world is constantly changing, up and down. The economy is up and down. The social situation, prices, everything is up and down. And so if our goal, our purpose is structured around this world is volatile, it's constantly changing, it's unstable. And so the person is now putting their routine, their life around something that cannot be tamed, that cannot be controlled. And so they are setting themselves up for depression, setting themselves up for a difficult life. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا. Whoever turns away from my remembrance, from the Quran, for them is a depressing life. Why? Because if it's not Allah, then what is it going to be? We all need a purpose. Everyone needs a purpose. If the purpose isn't Allah, what can it be? It has to be something created. And if it's created, it's finite. It's volatile. It's changing. And so the only life that can truly bring us stability, contentment, and happiness and life satisfaction is a life centered around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Tuma'ninah al-ruh is this. Now Abu Ismail, he says other things, right? But I don't want to get into those things that really aren't too practical for our audience and really for life itself. But that's what we can say about the tranquility of the soul. Now, just to mention the third level, الدرجة الثالثة طمأنينة شهود الحضرة إلى اللطف وطمأنينة الجمع إلى البقاء وطمأنينة المقام إلى نور الأزل. Again, really deep, unnecessary things, spiritual concepts. But what I will mention is طمأنينة الجمع إلى البقاء. And that is tranquility that is achieved through jama', through unity. And by unity, what I mean here is that when our life is unified. And the only way that can be unified is, as I was mentioning before, when everything in our life is meant to take us back to the eternal subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, as Abu Ismail rahimahullah ta'ala describes here, al-jama', unity, by going towards the baqa, the eternal, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more Allah is our center point, the more the rest of our life, everything in our life becomes shifted towards that gravitational force, that center point that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when you look at a life that's centered around this world, I have my company, I have my family, I have my own self, this and that, and each of these things has different needs, different wants, and so the person becomes all over the place. And these interests now contradict each other. How many very wealthy people have to make the decision, either my company or my family? A lot. In fact, one of these very wealthy people who's on Shark Tank was asked a question he was doing a talk in some university, and he was asked a question by a young gentleman. He tells him that, I'm building my company and I've made good way with my company. I mean, it's really rolling. And I'm currently engaged. And what I'm finding is that it's becoming clearer that I'm always in the situation where I either choose my company or my fiance. It's a type of either or. What is your advice? You know what his advice was? His advice was, well, you need to choose what is easier to replace. You need to get rid of what is easier to replace. What does he mean? The spouse, the fiance. It's easier to replace another person in your life than it is to replace a company. And so this person is, he's torn between these two decisions. What does Islam guide us to say? Well, Islam gives a lot of precedence to the family and rights in the family. Your wife has rights over you, and you're obligated to fulfill those rights. You're not obligated to have a company. You're not obligated to make millions of dollars a year. And so you need to first and foremost fulfill your obligations, and then whatever time you have left, you go and you can use that towards your company. Now, I'm not saying here that by choosing the wife, he now has to sacrifice his company. Rather, we know in Allah's qada and qadar, and we know Allah rewards us when we fulfill our religious responsibilities. So the way a Muslim is going to see it is, okay, here are my obligations. If I fulfill my obligations towards my family, Allah will put barakah in my life to be able to take care of my company as well. So in Islam, it's never an either or. It's halal and haram. If I fulfill my obligations, then our belief is that Allah will help us, assist us in other things in life. And the most common kind of scenario is when someone is, for example, a student is studying for a test. Should I go to the masjid and pray Aisha? Or should I spend that extra time studying for my test? If I go to Aisha, that's going to take an hour of my time. Should I study that extra hour and just pray at home, by myself at home? Or should I go to the masjid? This person now, how do I make this decision? The decision is actually quite simple. Go to the masjid, that pleases Allah, and Allah will put blessings in your time to make up that 1 hour. And try this, by the way. Next time we're in a hurry, and we say, okay, I'm not going to do my sunnah prayers because I'm in a hurry, say, you know what, I'm going to stop. I'm going to pray my sunnah prayers. How long does it take to pray your sunnah prayers? 2 to 5 minutes? That's it. What you'll find is that Allah will make up those 5 minutes for you by making the street lights green, kind of doing the qada to where you just a straight shot. Or, sometimes you go in a grocery store, you know how when you go to the line that, okay, I think this is going to be the quickest line? That's how we choose. And then it ends up being the slowest line. Yes, always. Right? And you're looking at the other lines, oh, why did I choose that one? All right? Perhaps if you pray your sunnah for the sake of Allah, Allah will help you make that better decision. This is how the Muslim thinks. And so when we gather all of our affairs, now how I manage my company, how I manage my family, how I discipline my kids, how I manage my money, how I manage my whatever it is, my own personal time, all of that is now challenged to what pleases Allah the most. That is very calming. Very calming. Brings unity to the self. My mind, my body, and my heart or my soul are now all unified towards the same goal. Our minds have different needs than our heart or our soul or our body. And what happens is people are torn. My body is telling me something, my mind is telling me something else, and my heart is telling me a third thing. They make movies out of this, by the way. You've seen these movies. My mind tells me that, stay with her, but my heart wants that other girl. As a Muslim, we say, like, what immaturity is this? The Quran comes, Allah comes and says, okay, mind, body, this is how you deal with this. This is how it unites. This is what pleases Allah. And if our goal is what pleases Allah, then that is what is going to please our mind and our soul at once. So how do we gain Tuma'ninah? Is by unifying the self, by channeling it all to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is Tuma'ninah. And this is the goal of the human being. And for the past several months, we have been building up to this. This is it. And if you find this in life, then you have been given the greatest blessing of life. You have been given the key of this life, and it serves as a bishara, a glad tiding for what's coming in the afterlife. Because your spiritual state in this life is really a sign of your spiritual state in the afterlife. You feel contentment in this life because of Allah, of course, in the Imanic understanding of this term. You feel serenity, you feel tranquility, then that is a sign of what is to come. But someone who's feeling pain, anguish, depression, etc., that could be, that doesn't necessarily mean what's going to come is the same or worse, but that means that something is wrong. Allah created our hearts and our minds to help us find Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's wired in that way. That is our fitrah, to find Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore our hearts and our minds will never find tranquility until it finds what they were wired to find. And that is Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it's not a surprise as to what we're seeing today. And so that is Tuma'ninah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among the people of Tuma'ninah, Ya Rabbil Alameen. And with that we conclude the the second volume of Madaris al-Salikin. We're actually coming close to the end. Although there's an entire volume to come, the third volume is a little bit, it's not of much concern to us because it starts getting into very, very Sufi things that is really not a necessary part of our Iman, nor is it a clear part of the Sunnah. So we just have a few more stations to go, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, but they are beautiful stations as well, until it leads us to the very, very highest level of Iman, and that is the station of Mahabbah. So we're almost there, we're getting close to the end, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.